and Legacy of John Carmack. I'm Mike Rifenbury. With me are Josh Hartman and Mike Schupsky. So we just got news a day or two ago that John Carmack has officially left id to take over as full-time CTO, Chief Technical Officer, of Oculus. Back in, I believe, August, he announced that he was moving to Oculus for the majority of his time, but he would remain as a technical advisor for id. That seems to not have panned out for them, so now here we are. And I don't want this to sound too much like a eulogy, because of course he's not dead. He hasn't even really left the gaming industry. He's just not going to be designing computer programs anymore, or gaming, programming games. And I think that's a big step, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does on the hardware side of things. I think that's probably better suited to his talents and desires, because there's less, maybe narrative creativity and more ability for him to solve technical problems. But let's just jump in. Do we want to go over some of the really big things that John Carmack has kind of through id given the gaming world?
Well, we had just talked about it 5 minutes ago, but the first-person shooter, as it exists today, largely thanks to John Carmack and the people that worked at it, all the way back in, 1993 was when...
Yes.
No, I'm sorry, but when didn't Wolfenstein come up first? Did Wolfenstein come up? Okay, so yeah, the first-person shooter, as it exists today, largely thanks to the work of many John Carmack, chief among them, I think, so, yeah.
And it's interesting because before that, and even concurrently with Wolfenstein and Doom, you did have flight simulators and things like that were 3D and could be considered games, but they weren't as good. They didn't. They weren't as fast paced. They weren't as good looking. Even though we look back on it now and we see Doom and the original Wolfenstein. But he kind of, I think he was really the first person, and this is an important distinction. He was sort of the first person in the industry to take all of this book knowledge, because he just consumed, college textbooks about computer graphics and programming, to take that knowledge and really transfer that to something that people could just kind of waste time on, playing Doom. They invented the deathmatch as we know it today, and it's largely unchanged since the early 90s. 20 years of this thing that they sort of created. Of course, id has seen better days as a company as well. They've been in development hell with Doom 4 for several years. They restarted it in 2011, I believe. And do we have any thoughts about
Doom 4?
Yeah,
Nothing but sadness at the moment.
Hopes and
futile desires. But Wolfenstein, for all intents and purposes, looks like it's going to be out next year.
Mm-hmm.
Is it next year? Okay, so that's something to look forward to. I didn't play Rage. I know you played Rage, so I don't have a lot of thoughts on that as far as that goes. If you had any just ideas and thoughts of Rage.
Rage, again, in a technical way, was good. The introduction of mega textures, I think, is really interesting.
Another question, real quick question. Did John Carmack work on Rage?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, well...
Because I looked it up, I just looked very briefly on the Wikipedia page. I didn't see his name anywhere. So.
Right, well, he wasn't the creative director, but okay. Insofar as the technology that supported the game, so the mega textures technology, and then, of course, id Tech, the engine that all of id's stuff runs on, is predominantly made by him. Which, again, sort of that going forward, without him at the company in any way, is a little troubling, because the announcement we had from id was, I believe, from Tim Willits, and he said, All of his projects are wrapped up. He's not doing anything else. He didn't leave in the middle of a project. He put a bow on it, nice and neat. But I don't think that's really how game design or any kind of design works. It's always iterative, and so you're always going to be tweaking and improving, until the day before you have to ship the product. It's not something that, oh, well, rubber stamp, that's done, I'm going to go now. And for them to kind of play it up like that, I think it's a little disturbing, because, I think that's contrary to reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess an assumption to be made is that he was working with them on Doom 4, I guess, would be a thought that we could think about.
Sure.
So, with him gone now, I don't know, what is... I mean, whatever he was working on helping people develop for that game, they say that he's helped them fully, but, like you said, it's not going to be there for, the months, if it indeed ever gets made, the months leading up to the release of the game itself, it won't be there.
Right. I mean, the game hasn't, I don't even know its official status. I mean, they're not talking about it. They're not actively promoting it. It's not even that far along.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not coming out next year. I mean, I think if it was coming out next year, we would probably already know about it.
It's like you said, I wouldn't call him creative, I'd call him technically competent. And big AAA games nowadays, in addition to being technically competent, they have to be creative, in a way, I would say. So, the fact that he's moving away from games themselves and more towards the actual hardware, just making sure something works properly, I guess, it's more in line with
his desires.
With his desire.
Yeah.
Because, I wouldn't call Doom a creative game. I'd call it a very technically competent game.
I was just reading all the things that we do know about Doom 4 is that he was saying that it was moving back to the original gameplay of Doom, and it wasn't as focused on the horror-styled gameplay of Doom 3. And I think it's a strange thing to hear, because when I think of Doom, I think of horror gameplay.
Yeah.
Because they all have their own terror, but I think I can see how that the first Doom is more action-oriented than Doom 3 was more about all the atmosphere. But even as good as Doom 3 was at creating that horror gameplay and the atmosphere and the scariness of it all, I think you're right to say that it's not a totally creative game.
It's not terribly the story.
It doesn't really have a good story. It doesn't have any really great characters or plot twists.
Yeah.
It's a game made of systems.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game made by a person who likes hardware. It's an experience that you partake in, but there's nothing that's actually being told to you. And I wonder if that type of I want to say that it has that type of game passed. You can't get away with that anymore. Now, having said that, Minecraft is a game built entirely on systems that has no story element to it, but it's also a sandbox.
But I'm just thinking of modern.
Control.
I'm thinking of modern first-person shooters, like BioShock Infinite is all about story in addition to the gameplay. I mean, John Carmack wouldn't be able to make a game like BioShock Infinite because it doesn't give a shit about the story. It gives a shit about how
it's true. And I think it's important also to note that we're not saying he doesn't give a shit about the story because of, not even necessarily because of what he's made in the past, but just because he's stated, many times, he doesn't care about. I believe the quote is, "A story in a video game is like a story in porn. You expect it to be there, but you're not actually paying attention to it." And that might have been the case in 1993, but that's not the case anymore.
No. Most games nowadays the story comes first and foremost, and the gameplay...
Most good games, unless the game has a system or a gameplay that is so irrelevant and so captivating in its own right. If Minecraft doesn't need a story, Minecraft couldn't really have a story. It would be a strange thing. Yeah. Battlefield and Call of Duty, they are the closest thing I can really think. They are... The stories in those games really don't matter. Some people say they like the stories in Call of Duty. They're really not stories. They're a series of ridiculous events. You go there for the gameplay, and in that instance, it's competitive gameplay.
Yeah,
and it's your skills and reflexes against other people, which is not something Doom has ever. Doom has never been that has. I mean, that's the highest scores.
Well, I mean, I think with the invention of the deathmatch, because Doom was the competitive game for many years.
When did Quake come out? Shit.
This is Quake is just that
extension. Like whenever
Quake's still
it's just whenever I think of like competitive multiplayer.
But Quake is not
things. I think of Quake.
It's not the dominant force of gameplay in the world. So if we're saying, can Doom 4 be successful? Can it be successful without John Carmack?
I don't know.
If Doom 4 is going to find success, it needs to find success on its own terms.
Yeah,
and is that something that John Carmack can give it? Because it either needs to be a story-driven experience, or it needs to compete with.
I'm okay with a game like the kind of game that John Carmack wants to make. A game that doesn't really place a lot of emphasis on the story, but the core mechanic is like rock solid. Like works, it just works.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what makes Doom 3 such a joy to play. Other than the incredibly atmospheric opening of and then the horror tinge elements. Like it's just a really fun shooter. It really works.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, yeah, we've talked about this before. Like the emergence of storytelling in games is a really very recent phenomenon. And games,
or at least the broadness.
The broadness and like the quality of work. Like the games are hiring writers now. Like that's a thing now. Like you're writing a story for a video game. That would be unheard of in a Doom. Like John Carmack, like, all right, you go write the thing. I'm going to actually do the real work.
Right. I mean, that's precisely how it happened. Yeah. Right.
But like now, writing is just as an essential element. And I wonder if that had a role in John Carmack saying, "I'm done making games because I just want to work on like the technical aspects of it,
mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't say like not that he doesn't agree with where the video game industry is going. It's just like he's not built.
He's not interested.
He's not made. He's not interested in, and he's not good at it. So like, why would he waste time? But like,
mm-hmm.
just keep making games.
Right. I think he can use his many talents in better ways. I think at Oculus,
mm-hmm.
Designing their headset. It's I guess shortly after he came on to the project, they solved a slew of huge problems that they had been having. I guess the headset is going to achieve 4K a lot more quickly than they had hoped. They fixed the motion sickness problems, really really big things. And so I think it's evidence of him probably in the end making a smart decision personally and as far as his career is concerned. But I also just wonder what was happening behind closed doors
at id specifically.
Right. And maybe was it just sort of this? He's drifted away from feeling like he can make an impact, or was there a specific thing? Because of course, id was bought by Bethesda,
mm-hmm.
or I suppose ZeniMax would technically own it, and then be published by Bethesda. Whatever.
Yeah. I see Bethesda's name on the Wolfenstein thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
You're right. So, is there something going on there? Because of course they were adamantly opposed to selling the company for so long, and then suddenly, we're selling the company, and then you had Todd Holland said he left. He was the president of id. He left in June. Matt Hooper, the creative director of Rage, he left recently and joined Oculus with Carmack. And so it seems like really big people are jumping ship.
Yeah.
And and it's not to say that there's no creativity left or something like. We're not saying that.
I wouldn't say this is like a real.
It's not unimportant either.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if this is like a perfect one-to-one analogy, but like I just think of Bethesda when they were bought by EA, and then about a year later, the two doctors, I forget the two people that founded. I'm sorry.
You mean BioWare?
What did I say?
Bethesda. Yes.
God damn it! I got Bethesda on the brain. The BioWare was bought out by EA, and then I want to say like a year later, the two founders of BioWare left the company. Well, they didn't go elsewhere; they just retired. But I don't know. Maybe I just made this analogy for no point, but like it's not a completely unheard of thing for a company to be bought out, and then the people who were in charge aren't really in charge anymore because now they answer to a boss.
Yeah,
maybe they don't like it, so they either leave or whatever. But I don't know.
That's true, and I think at some of the more recent QuakeCons, maybe even QuakeCon this year, with John Carmack's talk that he does, he was saying, I have to be more tight-lipped about certain projects because, now we have shareholders to worry about, we have all of this stuff. Whereas before, you can promise anything, and if you don't hit your date, well, so you're going to keep waiting, aren't you? It wasn't a big deal to say, to give out very detailed information about how the projects were going.
Mm-hmm. And again, it doesn't seem like Carmack is interested in the financial aspect. He's not interested in the storytelling aspect. All he's interested in, from the limited information I have from him, which, by the way, I still have to read Masters of Doom.
Yes, you do. Everyone should.
It's on my list. It's on my shelf. I'll get to it eventually. Everyone's waiting on pins and needles to see what I have to say about it.
I am.
But he just seems like a guy who is so intensely focused on being really good at this one thing.
Yeah.
And like everything else is just clutter.
Oh, right. And he's also said, publicly, he's like a remarkably unsentimental person. And it's true. He had a cat, and and he just he gave it away. Like he took it to the shelter because it was like too much of a distraction for him. He couldn't work on his game enough because he had to feed his cat, and so he took the fucking cat.
Bitch.
Right, and it's like, and he just did it, and that was it, and oh my god, what? You took your cat to the pound because it needed to be loved occasionally.
It was being a needy bitch. That's all you can say about it.
Who has the time?
Who's got the time, really?
Not
Who's got the time and the heart?
But I think that I think that says a lot. So he's not. He wouldn't have stayed at id for the sake of staying at id. He was the co-founder of the company, and I think for a lot of people, it would be sort of an emotional struggle to say, well, but I'm leaving, sort of my baby.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaving it in someone else's hands, and I'm not going to have anything to do with it.
That is true.
And I honestly, I don't know if that would have been a consideration for him. He's very logically minded.
Even in terms of thinking, I don't want to have Doom 4 come out and have me not have worked on So you don't think he sees
I just mean the company as a whole.
Okay, but I'm thinking you don't think he sees his IPs in a sentimental light.
No,
he doesn't look on and do as in Wolfenstein and say, "Oh, that's mine."
No.
Yeah, the evidence presented would lead against that.
Yeah.
And
and that's true.
It kind of, when you're talking about behind the scenes things, that does kind of make sense that there could, the whole scheme of how gaming in the gaming industry works has changed so much since they started that it really can't continue on like it did. It needs to become a totally different company if it's going to survive. And he was not the guy that was willing to go along with the kinds of games that they needed to create. And so, is id going to survive past him?
Depends on who they bring in.
It depends on who they bring in, because the question of whether it does or does not has nothing to do with the past. If it starts off, if it's successful, it will be because they found a new team of successful people. Yeah. And it's essentially, they're starting a new company. So id, as we knew it, is dead. The company is gone. Whether or not it continues to be alive, it is a new company that has taken its place and its name.
It's true.
And it will have its own benefits and its own,
But I would say that wasn't. Maybe Carmack leaving was sort of the final straw. The final straw.
The final vestige of the past.
Right. I think it.
Yeah, we don't know
it being absorbed into Bethesda would be the sort of beginning of that.
Yeah.
And you're right. And I think we'll see if it's actually a new company, or if it tries holding on to the past in such a way that
the fact that Bethesda bought it means that it does think it's capable of still putting out good products. I would think so. I mean, Bethesda wouldn't have bought it if they didn't. But
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Do you think they bought it because of John Carmack?
I think they bought it because it has some of the most widely recognized IPs in the game.
Yeah, I mean,
world.
I think they could have justified buying it just for the name.
Yeah,
even if they don't care that id makes games that id should make from a sentimental point of view, the fact that they can say anything they want is from id. They now have control over the id name, and if they want to turn it into an RPG company like BioWare, they can hire the people they need and say, "Hey, look what id made," regardless of what id was before.
Not even id, but I just mean that now. I mean, and they're already. I mean, we're getting a Wolfenstein game that's not being made by id.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Machine Games is making Wolfenstein, so they have access to these IPs now. So anyone they want to make a Doom game can make a Doom game, or a Rage game, or a Quake game, or Wolfenstein. You know, they have access to all of these like huge recognizable franchises. And I mean, shit, they could go Mitt Romney on the company and just, you know, flush them all out and, you know, pack it with people. You know, not again that maybe they want to do that, or I mean, it doesn't seem that they have wanted to do that. But
the other thing
it's still, you know,
the other thing I'm thinking about is like all of these big IPs are big IPs from that past of like the 90s, like bringing those IPs into today's. We'll see with Wolfenstein if it's actually a success. Like this is the big thing. Like you have Doom, you have Quake, you have Wolfenstein. Can you adapt these franchises to this world that now requires good stories and good voice acting and good everything, in addition to actually playing well? I don't.
And I think with shorter production cycles than id has recently, and by recent I mean in the last decade, you know, been accustomed to dealing with. I mean, you had Doom 3 in 2003, right?
2000, yeah.
And then you had Rage in 2011.
Mm-hmm. And that was it.
And now we're working on.
We were supposed to have had Doom 4, but then they reset the whole process.
Right. I mean, that's not much product for that many years of work.
Oh.
I mean, it's kind of crazy actually how long Rage took, and you know they kind of said once they released Rage, like, okay, we can't do that again. We can't do that again. That was way too long. And here they are,
again,
like 6 years into development on another Doom game. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can't take 6 years to develop a first-person shooter.
No.
You just can't do it.
Well,
even Bioshock.
Yeah,
even Bioshock.
That was the one I was thinking of. But
even Bioshock didn't take that long.
Bioshock did not.
I mean, there are open world games that take less time.
They turned out a Mass Effect every 2 years.
Yeah, which god damn, that's impressive too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it's all kind of up in the air, and it's hard to really know what will happen. And I think it's unhelpful that, you know, we won't actually know what's been going on behind closed doors. I mean, maybe we never will. Maybe
we'll get a memoir 30 years down the road.
Sometime from now, but
a sentimental John Carmack looking back on that cat that he wished he had.
If only he'd taken the cat, Doom 4 would have gone out on time.
Yes.
His title would be Mr. Jangles' retrospect. What could have been?
I actually don't remember the name of the cat. It was not Mr. Jangles.
I want to think.
If it wasn't Mr. Jangles, then I'm not interested in the cat anymore.
Oh. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the A2Pcast. You can check us out at livetoplay.com. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/livetoplay. We'll talk to you next time.